Hey everyone, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. In today's episode, we have two separate guests. Our first guest is Joe from Minnesota, and our second guest, we will call him Sunbow, and he is from Canada. Both guests have a different outlook on the Sasquatch topic, and they believe it to be more of a spiritual type of thing. So please show your respect, and everybody has a different opinion. And not everybody views this as an unknown creature that's physically out there roaming the forest. So, yeah, you'll have to be open-minded, and let's get right into it, guys. All right, Joe, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Miguel. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
Oh, pretty good. I'm glad to have you on the show. Joe, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounters from the very beginning.
Okay. Well, I'm Joe. I'm from Minnesota, and my first Bigfoot encounter happened when I was like, I don't know, 12 years old. I was with my aunt and uncle, and we were traveling from Minneapolis on up to Red Lake in northern Minnesota. Red Lake is about 36 miles north of Bemidji, about 200 and some miles away from Minneapolis. And on our way up, we're going on this single lane country road, and it was winding, and there was a church that we came up on this section. We were about 3/4 of the way to Bemidji. And so we were in the middle of Minnesota, on the upper side of Minnesota in the woods. And we're going through a windy road, and there was a church ahead of us. And it was a brown church with a big white cross on the top of it. And it was a marker. It just let us know that we were only about an hour away from uh from getting home, because Red Lake traveling is about 4 or 5 hour trip, depending on how you travel, how fast you go. So we only about an hour to go, and that's the church. While looking in at the church, I mean, I'm sitting in the back seat, my uncle's driving, my aunt's in the passenger seat to his right, and my cousins are right behind me right to my left in the back seat with me, and they're talking with themselves, and I was looking out the window with my aunt, and there was a Bigfoot back there. He he was sitting. He was about 50 yards off the road through some brush, and it was the fall of the year, and you could look back and you could see into the woods, and he stood up and took off walking. Um, the way he looked, the description, tall and skinny. This was not a wide Bigfoot, as we hear so much about. This was a tall, skinny one, and it just, my aunt seen it, and she got real excited, and she started yelling, oh my God, look at that. And she was hitting my uncle on his arm, like, tapping it, our wives do when they're riding on the passenger side. She's hitting him in the shoulder, saying, look, 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 look. And he looks over, and he he checks the road, he sees his surroundings, and he starts to hit the brakes, and he looks, and he's like, wow. Yeah, it was crazy. So that was my first experience with Bigfoot. And then like visually seeing him growing up in Red Lake. So it's a Chippewa reservation, and or Ojibwe, and they had, if you were quiet as a child, you could hang out with the adults when they visit. But if you were doing kid things like playing or whatever, you had to go outside. You couldn't be in the same room with the adults. But if you were quiet, you could sit in there. So I would be quiet and listen to what they were talking about, because they had a lot of different interesting stories about the experiences they had in the woods up around the res, and the different cultural beliefs that we have, the elders. So this was, when I'm 7 years old, it's 1980, and we're talking, when we're talking elders, we're talking people who were born in the 1920s. So they had a life pre-electricity on the reservation. They had experiences. So when you listen to them, you would get a whole different world from 1980 reservation, to the 1940 reservation. Two different worlds. And the beings. So you have Bigfoot out there, but he's called, some people call him the big man, and but it's always with respect and reverence. You don't, the medicine men work with Bigfoot, not normal people. Regular people stay away from Bigfoot. Um, so I'd always heard these things coming up about Bigfoot, and just thought, as life went on, I went to the same school as everybody else does in America, and I wrote Bigfoot off as a mystical creature, um, something used, maybe a fable, something like that, for teaching purposes from American Indians to their children. Um, but my so that is my first experience was when I was 12 years old. And then around the same time there, we were hunting. So on the reservation, you can hunt. You can, what's it called? You can shine. So shining is illegal throughout most everywhere, except for on Red Lake. I know you can shine there. I don't know if there's other reservations where you can shine, or other private property where, if you have private property, you can do whatever you want on it, right? Um, to an extent. So on the reservation, you can shine, which is you take a big spotlight and you go out into the woods and you look for eyes. And you go on the roads. Well, it's not really the country roads that we stay on when we go shining. We would go into new roads, and when I say new roads, I mean like the fire, not the fire, but the roads department and different logging company. For whatever reason, the tribe makes roads out into the woods for various projects, and those roads are what we would use to go shining on. So there'd be a network of back roads. You can jump off the main highway and go back into the woods. And we went down this one ditch road, and on both sides of it was I don't know, a ditch with about 5 foot of water standing in it, running about, I don't know, 3 or 4 miles. Well, we were on this ditch road, and they're shining, and there's this clump of bushes to the left of the road, and then it was wide open all the way back, just open fields. But there was this clump of bushes just to the left of the road, and the bushes were, I don't know, taller than my dad. I'm a little guy. I'm about a foot shorter than my dad, so I don't know. I'm about 4 foot tall at the time, 4'8", somewhere around there, maybe 5 foot. I'm not sure. I was a little kid, but the trees were taller than the adults, and my dad and my uncle were, I don't know, 5'10", and so I'd say about 9 feet at the most at these things that the bushes were when they're shining. And we're talking like scrub brush. It's not the kind of stuff you can climb on. If you were to grab it, it would just, you'd break it eventually, or it would just bend to the ground. So it's not something that could support weight. And all of a sudden it's shiny, and my dad is shining, and he goes from the right side of the road and comes across to the left side and shines on that brush. And in that brush, there was a head. There was a head that was standing like right there, like right there, and it ducked real fast. My dad didn't see it because he's not looking at the side of it. He's hunting, so he's looking for eyes out in the brush. So you look out in the field, you look off into the distance. You don't look right on top of you. And I'm a little kid. I can't shoot a gun. I can't. Um, they don't let me shine. The only time they let us kids do the shining or any kind of shooting is in special situation. This wasn't a special situation. We're out there to learn, to watch, and to help. If we caught something, that was our whole purpose. So I'm sitting there watching everything, and I seen that head, and I freaked out, and I started tapping my dad. My dad said, "What?" What? He's getting a little annoyed. He's like, "What?" And I said, "Dad, there's something in that brush or something." And he's like, "Well, we're past that brush now, so it's okay. Just sit down." Because you're driving, and we passed that brush. But for me, it was awesome because it was the second time I had seen it. Um, the head, you couldn't see any eyes. If it did have eyes, then I would have to say the eyes were all black because all you seen was black. But it was a definite head, and it was crazy. So that was all like under 13 years old. When I got to be 15, I had some weird experiences up there. 16, I got my license and I stopped going up to Red Lake pretty much a lot until just recently. I started going back up there, but I stayed in touch with family and stuff like that. But that was the beginning experiences of my first two Bigfoot um, experiences with Bigfoot, where I got to see him.
Okay.
And now, go ahead.
I was going to ask, can you describe the features on the first Sasquatch that you encountered, the one that was sitting down back in the woods?
Yep, it was more like a because of the distance, it was more like you could see the figure well enough to see what that he wasn't wearing anything. You could see that it was brown. It was a dark brown from head to toe, and it was tall. I mean, like really tall, and it was slender. It was not thick, and he was not wide. Um, it looked like the Scrooge. So when you think of the Scrooge, that's what this Bigfoot looked like. It was a Scrooge, tall and skinny and hairy all over, but you couldn't see the facial features. He was too far off.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Yep. So that was 12, and then let's fast forward. We'll go right up into 2016. We'll just jump all the way up in there. So 2016, I had been watching Finding Bigfoot because that was the only thing that had really been on TV for Bigfoot. So it was cute. I'd like to watch that, but I knew that it's a kids show. But you make do with what you got, and that's what we had. So I was watching Finding Bigfoot and decided that I wanted to maybe go out there and see what's out there. So 2016, let's see, I'm turning 50 this year, so that was just trying to do math 7 years ago. So I was 42, 43, somewhere around there. I started to investigate Bigfoot to lose weight. I was 280 pounds when I started investigating Bigfoot in 2016, and immediately, so I started looking in like June of 2016, and by July of 2016, I had my first like officially documented thermal experience with Bigfoot, and it blew my mind. Because I wasn't investigating where everybody else was investigating. I took a little bit of what I grew up knowing from my culture, and a little bit of what I had seen on Finding Bigfoot, and incorporated the two of those things to see what I could find. I live in Minneapolis, and I decided to stay on the rim of Minneapolis. Go to the suburbs a little bit. So I went down to the Minnesota River is where I started, because in Shakopee, Minnesota, I know that there was a sighting in the either late 70s or early 80s. There was a Bigfoot sighting in that area. So I went to Egan, which is about 15 miles, maybe 10 miles southwest of Shakopee on the Minnesota River. Both communities have the Minnesota River in its location. So I went to the Minnesota River in Egan and followed that. And as soon as I got there, now in the beginning, everything was signed to me, like every broken branch, everything. Oh my God, look at this, look at this, look at this. I was out there with hyper enthusiasm. So I shouldn't have been saying, of course, as the years went on, I was able to discern what is a natural break and what is not what is not natural. And sometimes it's hard to tell, but if you do this a while, you can tell. And there's other things that happen out in the field that you pick up as well, as you know. And so I'm sitting out there looking at everything, going, "Oh wow, this is." But then my misunderstood natural placements led me to actual placements. And there was a teepee out in Egan off the beaten path. And I know that there are members of my community who still practice our ceremonies. And so that was my first thought, was we have healers out here working with their helpers. So I was like, okay, this is what this is. That's what I thought, but I was like, this could be Bigfoot, and I just kept on looking. Well, then the 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 clues, I'm not sure, the markings, and see. So as we know, in the community, we have tree manipulations. That's what everybody looks at. Nobody knows what tree manipulations are. I don't know what tree manipulations are either. I have my guesses just like everyone else does. But inside of that, I also have understandings of what the elders had told me and shared with me as I was coming up. And some of these truths are still true today. The thing with tree manipulations is, from my understanding, they're markers to let the healers know they're there. So those who work with them, who have a relationship with them, this might be going a little bit into the weeds here. So if you want to cut this out when you post the video, that'd be cool too. I don't know. But the helpers, the healers who work with Bigfoot need sign. They don't need sign, but it helps, because as they work with them, you hear people talk about mind speak. It's that's kind of what the healers have as well. It's not, it's more like intrusive thoughts. If you are familiar, if anyone listening to this is familiar with intrusive thoughts, that's more like what this is. But you understand, see, and this is where it gets, so where am I at? I don't want to get too far into different things. I just want to get into my experiences. Okay, so I followed Bigfoot. I found Bigfoot along the river. There was a definite sign with Bigfoot that was there, and I followed him from Egan. I think it's 9 miles up the river to where I eventually had the biggest encounters, which is ironically right outside my home. And so 2016, I'm following him up, and then 2000, I think it's 18, I think I had the 2017, I had the footprint. So 2016, I'm following up the Mississippi River, and 2017, I got the best footprint that I have ever seen in my life. So from June of 2016 to January of 2017, so a total of 6 months, I had an unbelievable number of experiences with Bigfoot, and I got his footprint and the trackway. Most amazing thing that I had ever experienced in my life. And that's where things really changed for me, was January of 2017. So as I said, I followed him up the river, and I've shut down my Bigfoot channel, Minnesota Bigfoot, that I had. I shut it down. I think I got 3 or 4 videos on there, but the channel doesn't represent what I know today. So I'm coming out with new explanations of what it is that I've experienced out there, and I'm trying to put it in a way that is not threatening to people. See, when we talk about paradigms and shifting paradigms, it's just about letting go of old information. It's just about letting go of the past, what we hold on to, and that's hard. That's why people have habits that are hard to break. It's hard for people to let go of what they know, because that's what they know. But what happened out in the field for me brought me right back to the elders talking when I was a kid and everything they had said. And so it made me understand that this is not, and this is where we're going to get 50% of the community mad. This is not a physical creature. It's not just a purely physical creature. If it were a physical creature, this land has been occupied or been under exploration since the old world found the new world. So the old world has been looking all over North America, and there's still parts of North America that I believe are completely untouched, that some person or family or corporation owns, that's never even went onto the land. They just have 1,000 acres of untouched land. Maybe they've sent some scientists out there, geologists, whatever. They did some work on it, but it's not, it's relatively still unexplored. People still don't know what's going on. So there's a lot of things in North America that are still yet to be discovered. That's just my personal opinion. Oh gosh, man, I did a lot of talking. So now I'm up the river, and Bigfoot, I've either followed Bigfoot up to basically a half mile from my house, or he's followed me. And that's the big question. And there's investigators out there now, like the Trail to Bigfoot, Alabama, Bigfoot Jonathan Odom, Blaine Tyler. There's a bunch of different people, maybe even yourself, Michael Merchant, who subscribe to the fact that there's something more to Bigfoot than what we're currently understanding. There's something more than just a undiscovered wood ape. And that's where I'm at in my investigation, is taking that information that I do have and trying to relay it in a way that doesn't upset people. And because there's a lot of contextual, there's a lot of shifts in the sand here. There's a lot of so when I seen Bigfoot, when I seen his foot, when I've seen him as a kid, I wrote it off as kid experience. I was like, okay, I was a kid. I don't know. I know what I saw, but I was a kid. Now, as a man, I know what I saw. Now, I've seen Bigfoot physically, with my own eyes, once, twice for sure, as I sit in my chair right now and think about it, twice for sure. Once I was out in Egan, and I had gone to this kill site. I found a kill site, and I'm pretty sure the kill site I had found was from a mountain lion, because there were mountain lion tracks I had found down there. And I told people there was mountain lion tracks, and they were like, "Get out of it, ain't no mountain lion." Well, 2 years after I had said there was mountain lion tracks, a lady along the Minnesota River in Egan, but in a different part of the river, different section, ran into a mountain lion with her dog. She was filming walking down this pretty park. It's got a ramp on it, because the ground is soft. It's oh god, not seaweed. It's a marsh. It's a swamp, so you can't really walk on it. So they built a deck, and you can walk all through that marshy area, the swamp. Well, on that deck came a mountain lion, and she filmed it running on the top rail right by her, like at full speed. It was crazy. But there was that mountain lion. So I'm not sure if the kill site I found was that mountain lion's kill site, or coyotes, or the Bigfoot. But I knew Bigfoot was in the area. And there's also questions I have with Bigfoot because of my elder teachings, or elder listening to elders talk, and my experiences today. So I'm trying to make sense of these things. And sometimes when they don't make sense, then you just accept. All right. So when elder wisdom comes up against, but that ain't the way I experienced it, I'm backing off on that ain't the way I experienced it, and I'm going with the elder wisdom. There's reasons that the things are shared, and it's never to, you don't share something with somebody to get them hurt. That's the thing. You don't do that. You share to keep people from getting hurt. And so now we got Bigfoot, and did he follow me up the river, or did I follow him to his location? Now, one thing in my investigations that has taught me is Bigfoot doesn't leave. Like I hear a lot of investigators talk about, oh, they migrate, they migrate. They don't. It was January of 2017, the dead of winter, when I found my perfect track, the most awesomest track I've ever seen. Uh, Dead of winter, right there. He's still there. They're still in that location. I can go down to my location. That's where they are. So is it their home? And now this is where people have to be open minded. Is it their home, or is it an entry point from where they come from? And the reason I say is it an entry point from where they come from, because there are also investigators out there who talk about portals and vortexes and the things that Bigfoot can do. Now, a lot of the investigators and a lot of the world is moving away from spirituality. They're moving away from, they're making trades in the S words. And when I say the S words, I'm talking about spirituality versus science. People are leaning towards science instead of spirituality. So they're talking about, what does the technology that Bigfoot has that makes them able to do these things? And from a scientific standpoint, all the scientists say yes. In the past, mystics were considered supernatural because we didn't understand the tricks they were using. That's the way scientists pitch it. But there are things in the science community, especially when we start talking about, and this is ironic, that science has a spook science or a ghost science, and that's the string theory science, the quantum physics science. That science behaves in ways that traditional science says it can't behave. So as an investigator, I really enjoy investigators who are thoughtful, like yourself, that will go into other genres and try to pick and pull pieces, what we understand at least, and incorporate it into our investigations. Like my investigations went from knocking on trees and whooping, that kind of stuff, to now more of it. When I'm out in the field, I rarely talk. And the reason I rarely talk is because I found that 90% of my evidence that I capture is strange audio going into the paranormal field. So when I go back home and I review my videos, and you might experience this too, I remember my videos when I'm out there and I'm filming. I remember what happened. Like if I'm out in that field, let's say I went out there today and I filmed, and now I'm interviewing here, but I checked the video after this interview, I'm going to remember what happened out in the field, because it's always like my awareness goes up when I'm out there. I know that I need to be aware and to trust my instincts and to trust myself, because that's what's led me to the most experiences. Like the most incredible days have been when I listened to myself. Some of the most terrifying days was when I didn't listen to myself, and those are the encounters. So when we go out in the woods, I know everybody's like, "Oh, it's just Bigfoot." There's more than just Bigfoot out there. And um, here's something: have you watched the Expedition Bigfoot?
Yeah, yeah, I have.
You've seen some of that. And did you see the episode where they had lights in the trees and they had weird phenomena like that they couldn't understand, they couldn't quite explain?
No, I haven't. I've just seen a little bit on YouTube. Joe, if you
Oh,
would kind of go into your encounters and experiences, you found this track on the river. What happened after that? Did you encounter them? Did you
so
did you see one?
yep. So when I had that track on the river, I brought my 17. No, no, God, no, no. How old was she? This is 2017. She's 18 in 2023. So that's 6 years ago. She was 12. So she was going to be 12. She was 11 years old when I took her down to the river to go bigfooting with me. And we had started following those tracks. She was so excited. Dad, look at it. And we're following. And the tracks were at least 5 feet apart in a straight line. There's video of it, um, and pictures of it. And she was so excited. She wanted to go down into this hole. There was this tree that was pushed over, and she wanted to go down in there. And I said, "No, you're not going to go down in there." And it was tiny. There's no way. a Bigfoot creature or even a tall, skinny one like I had seen when I was a kid could get into that hole. That hole was a raccoon-sized hole, foxhole maybe. She wanted to go in there, and I was like, "Get out of there! You don't know, stay out there." Well, when she went toward that hole, we got a what is that? A whoop? We got a whoop, and it's recorded on video. And it scared my daughter. She wanted to get out of there. I told her it's okay. Let's just, hang out. So they're watching us, and I couldn't understand it, and I really couldn't understand it. And we talked about Expedition Bigfoot here in this current year of Expedition Bigfoot. They caught him invisible on video. It's really cool. The things that Expedition Bigfoot are doing are using technology that I can't afford, that no independent investigator can afford, and they're using technology, and it is producing results. So when it whooped and we're out there in the field, and I thought that he was right there. He probably was. So there was tracks, and the tracks, as we followed them, they were about, oh God, about 3 blocks long, and then they just stopped. The tracks just stopped, and I did a circular look. I started in one area, did a circle, didn't find a footprint, then did another wider circle, didn't find any footprints, and I did, I think, about 4 big circles, and didn't find any other footprints. And I went out about 15, 20 feet looking for prints, maybe thinking that he might have jumped or something, but the tracks just ended. More experiences. So I went down. So that's one side of the river. Once I found him at the river here, so where can I go? There's so many experiences. I'll talk about what happened when it went to my house. So I live a half mile from the river in a very highly populated area, city, dense area. South Minneapolis, some people are scared of South Minneapolis because of everything that happens, but it's not that scary. In my house, we have a doorbell on the rear side of our home that is disconnected from the doorbell. I snipped the wires a long time ago because I have grandkids, and the kids they would just ring the doorbell. They would just play with it. So I just got rid of it. I just snipped it a long time ago. Well, after I've been investigating, I'm home, and my wife's home. The family's here. It's myself, my oldest son, my daughter, who went down to the river with me, and one of my grandkids. And all of a sudden the doorbell rings, like just goes like batty. And my wife says, "Who the hell?" She said, "Joe, can you go look for that?" So I said, "Oh, okay." And went to the rear door, and I knew there wouldn't be anybody there, but I went to the rear door and opened it and looked. There was nobody there. I was like, I was, I was, no, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure. I was thinking maybe one of my son's friends or one of my daughter's friends got hurt, and they were in the back ringing the doorbell. That's kind of the way it was, the bing, 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 bing. Nothing was there. So then I went back and told my wife nothing was there, and it happened again. Bing, 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 bing. So then I go out there, and instead of opening the door, I look, like I shut off the lights in the kitchen, because this is happening at night. I shut off the lights in the kitchen so I can see out the window, and there's nothing out there. And I'm like, what the hell? And then we're standing there. My wife comes, talks to me. She says, "What's going on?" And bing, 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 it starts ringing again. And she's like, "Oh my God, Joe, take that off the wall. Take that down. Take that," because the power brick on that's actually still up in the basement. That she said, "Go pull it." So I went downstairs, and I pulled that brick off and killed it so it couldn't ding no more. But it shouldn't have been dinging in the first place. You know what I mean? Um, that same day, the next day, we went out, and while we were outside sitting there visiting, having coffee, whatnot, seen on the door, big old handprint. So I went up there and I took a picture of the handprint, and I got video of the handprint, and the handprint is crazy. So he'd been to my house in the middle of a city. He's been to my house. So when investigators say he's scared of people, he's not scared of people. When investigators say you need to go way out into the country, you don't need to go way out in the country. Bigfoot was put here to serve people. That's the whole purpose of him. And so he's with people. He's among people. He's not scared of people. We can't hurt him. So whenever you hear anybody saying they shot Bigfoot, the military killed him, you can't do it. It ain't gonna happen, and that I can say that with certainty. Um, and the more that we keep investigating, and the more that we keep finding, the more that you just can't ignore the unexplainable, the weird things that happen out there. Um,
You said you had an encounter where you caught him on thermal. Would you go into that?
yep. So July of I caught him on thermal twice. July of 2016, I caught him on thermal, and that one happened down at the Minnesota River and the Mississippi River where they join. And we're in a vehicle. We're driving. We're going slow. We got a FLIR one, and we're filming back into the woods. And we're driving by, and you got parking lots and different open areas because we're in a park. We're in the Fort Snelling State Park. That's where this encounter happened. And I'll say encounter with this one because he charged us. We're driving along. We got this little Toyota RAV4. My wife has her window open because the FLIR thermal won't work through glass. If you have the window up, it can't see out past that glass. So you got to have the window open, and it's out there registering heat. A cool thing. There's a couple of cool things with this FLIR that happened. The first cool thing is that it was registering one kind of temperature, and as we passed Bigfoot and got him on FLIR, and I hit the brakes and I go back up, the color temperature changes on the device. Don't know why it did that. Can't still explain why it changed colors, but it's like the environment changed. Now, I've been saying that Bigfoot can change the environment, and I've got one, two, three different video examples of environments changing. And there are other investigators. I think even yourself have pictures of strange things, like there's a bird on the ground. Anyway, I've got this therm going, and I back up, I put it in reverse. All of a sudden, the color temperature on the FLIR changes. We go back and we get this monstrous figure on FLIR, and it's way back there. It's way back there. He's easily 60 feet, if not 100 feet off the trail. Definitely 50 feet. He's back there. So, but he's monstrous on the FLIR, and it looks like a Hershey kiss. If you took the tip of the Hershey kiss and mushed it down, that's what this figure looked like. And it came waddling. That's the best way I can put it. Is like when you're looking at it on the FLIR in real time. In real time, it's smooth. But when you watch the video, because it's recorded at I think 16 hertz or 13 hertz, you get judder. So you get this odd movement. So on FLIR, the movement on FLIR one at least is not smooth, and you can see that it's weird. But he's coming straight toward us, and I floored. I get out of the way. Um, it was crazy. The whole thing. So we had the color change on the FLIR once we passed Bigfoot and got Bigfoot in FLIR, and then before he starts moving toward us, there's a tree snap. So a tree break or a snap, whatever people, that's a term that we use, a tree snap, to wood knock, right? That's in the audio, and then he starts coming toward us. He was monstrous. I went back there and did a size comparison, and I am, gosh, one third, one fourth the size of this one, of this Bigfoot that we caught on FLIR at the Fort Snelling State Park. I caught Bigfoot again a second time. Um, I might get the dates wrong. It was September. It was this month of like maybe 2018. Um, but it's Bigfoot in a tree. And I walked down to the location where I investigate at Gorge Park. And I'll say the names because, like I said, you can never hurt Bigfoot. You can't do anything with it. If anything, there's some reasons to be cautious as a person, definite reasons. But I went down to Gorge Park, and I was up on the top. Now, the top is about, depending on where you stand, it's a cliff. It's a cliff way down to the Mississippi River. So you got some cliffs that are as high as maybe 100 feet, and then below. So it doesn't go any higher than 100. This portion of it is maybe 40, 50 feet off the ground, and it's not a straight cliff. I don't think there's any 90s. I think at the most there's an 80. So I mean, you could get really messed up if you fall down the thing. But it's a good way down there. And I brought my clear one again, and I'm filming down there because I know he's back there. I've had enough experience at this time. This is 2018 for sure, if not 19. So I've had a couple of years out in the field. I know what I'm doing now. I'm very comfortable with everything, and I know. Anyway, I capture this guy. He climbs up on a tree, and when he's up there, he sits and then he looks my direction. Now I'm using a FLIR, so there's no light um to give away my position because I believe they can see infrared light. So there's no, I'm not using night vision that needs infrared light in order to see. I'm just using thermal, well, infrared again, but it senses the heat. And when he was up in the tree, we figured he went. Oh, my numbers, I won't even get into that. I don't have them off the top of my head, but we figured he was about 60 feet in front of us. Everything seemed to be about 60 or 50 feet in front. Like, I wonder if that's a real thing, but everything seems to be about 50, 60 feet in front of me, just in front of me. And he was up in the tree. Well, on the video, you can see his hands. It's the weirdest thing, Miguel. His hands went, like I was looking at bones, man. It was the weirdest thing. They look like bones. Anyway, they go upside down. It goes upside down and it comes down the tree. The top of the head looks like a bear. Okay, that's what I thought it was myself. Even looking at it, I was like, this looks like a damn bear. But there's no bears in Gorge Park in the middle of Minneapolis and St. Paul. There's no bears here. Never seen a bear track here either, and I've been down there forever. So, but it looked like a bear. That's exactly what it looked like. But bears don't come down trees upside down. Also, bears make noise when they go up a tree. And the FLIR uses the audio from the HTC one that I was using. That's what I use with my FLIR. It uses the microphone to capture audio for the video. You can hear me breathe. I do a cough at the end of it because it came down the tree head first and start coming up toward me. Now, as a hunter, I know that animals, if they don't stand their ground, move away. They move away from you unless they're a predator. They'll come toward you. Sometimes prey animals will come up to you and sniff you and do all that good stuff too. But usually as predators, they will stalk. And that's exactly what, gosh, see, that's exactly what Bigfoot did in this FLIR video, was climb the tree, see me, turn upside down, come down head first, and then walk up the side of the cliff toward me. And when it did, I coughed and I took off running. The other thing that's strange about this FLIR video is when it's up in the tree, you can see a bear head. A bear. I mean, it is, it's a bear headed. If anything, you would think koala, right? It's a bear head, and it comes down the tree. And so in our culture, Bigfoot can mimic any sound in the forest. Bigfoot can also be anything that it wants. It can take over. It can take the form of anything. There's other beings in the woods that can do that as well. So did I capture on film, on video, Bigfoot morphing into other beings? It's far-fetched, man. It's far-fetched even for me, but I'll tell you what, my reality perception has been changed forever because number one, Bigfoot isn't supposed to exist, but he does. Okay, so now the scientific community and all of the United States government and Canadian government, they're saying that there's no such thing as Bigfoot, and they're very adamant about it. Why is my question? Because he does exist. So there's a reason they're saying he doesn't exist. And everybody's saying, oh, it's because of the logging industry. They don't care about the logs. They don't care about anything. If anything, we've seen capitalism doesn't care. Capital money will go where it wants to go, except for in this instance. So I don't know why they're denying Bigfoot, but you have, I would say, millions of people with eyewitness accounts, experiences with Bigfoot throughout the course of the time um, that the United States has been found. You got this, and then even before that, you got millennia. You got since the world began stories from the different nations that were here before that still exist, that are still here, that people still have different accounts. So it's just amazing. What other time did I experience Bigfoot when I was out there? So uh there's this so the Pike Island is, where am I at here? Okay, Pike Island and the flare. So the first flare is down by Pike Island. It's in Fort Snelling State Park. Um, Pike Island is in the middle of the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers, and it creates like a little triangle out there. And there, I was trying to think. It's so hard to explain. Um, I have this on video. There was a sound. I found prints. Odd prints. They weren't gigantic. Um, they were narrow, if anything, and the toes were too long, like abnormally long toes. It was a strange print. So I don't know if this was Bigfoot or what. I figure another being, another creature out there, another cryptid, right? Um, but it's prints. There was two of them, and they went from the main trail where everybody walks off into the woods. And so I was watching that. I started looking, you start looking for trails to see if it's a well-worn path, if things have been through there quite a bit. Are you dealing with hooved tracks, or are you dealing with pads, dogs, canines, or if you're out there bear. So what's making these paths? You take a look. There's little indicators you can look at to see what is traveling through there. But these tracks led me to an area that couldn't be seen from the normal walking paths. Like in summer, in full growth, you wouldn't be able to see this area. It was hidden away, tucked away. And inside that area was a clearing. And when I was in that clearing, it reminded me of the area where I found the track for Bigfoot in January. Had the same kind of feeling, the same kind of thing. While I was in there, there was a loud crack, and I took off running. It's on video. I took off running because I didn't know. I had a eerie feeling to begin with, and that loud crack got me to go. I took off running, and out of nowhere, there was a person walking on the main trail coming toward me. That still baffles me today. But going into the old understandings of Bigfoot can take any shape, and other beings can take other shape, then I know that it could have been anybody. See, so this topic, when you get away from the rigors of mainstream investigators who want to stick to a scientific uh, mindset without even going into the 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 scientific, the string theory aspects of it, that kind of where science changes. It's not just 1 2 3, but 1.1 or negative 1.3. There's variables, there's new variables, and that's the kind of science that needs to go into this kind of stuff. uh and I have so many more experiences, but we've already been talking for quite a while. uh
Yeah, that's up to you. Do you want to wrap it up and ask me some questions,
um
or what do you want to do?
well, gosh, I would just like people to know that the Bigfoot is real. It definitely is real. The question is, why is states government and Canadian government, and I only talk about those two governments because those are the only two governments that I'll have any possible dealings with. Of course, the United States all the way, and then possibly Canada because they're right here by me. Maybe Mexico, but man, I'm in Minnesota, you know. Um, but why are these governments saying that they don't exist? That's my question, and we'll never get an answer.
Yeah.
We'll never get an answer.
Must be connected to aliens and UFOs if they're keeping it a secret. Is
Something,
the same as
something.
yeah.
When
I
you first started out, you had a picture of a. You thought it might have been a bird. Do you remember that? It
no.
was trail cam. I think it was near your killing fields.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a possible crow, bear, or juvenile Sasquatch is what we said it could be.
Exactly. And that was one of the first pictures I had seen from you. I seen evidence that I'd seen from you. I was like, this guy is experiencing what I'm experiencing out there, these weird things. That's what I'm talking about. These weird things where it's like the technology, did it fail or did it work perfectly? That's the question is I think the technology worked perfectly. And what you caught was um, basically what Expedition Bigfoot caught in this fourth season on their last episode. I think it's episode number 4. They caught a disturbance in the frequencies because people don't understand. I think you do that frequency. All vision works all on frequency, right? We see in a certain frequency,
Mm-hmm.
and if the camera is always set at a certain frequency, but it can pick up different things as well. And I think it caught. I think it caught a. I think you caught a. It's definitely unexplained, man.
Yeah, it's strange. So
How do you feel about the paranormal aspects of Bigfoot? Do you feel like there's validity in that, or do you feel like it's just our nerves when we're out there?
yeah, I think there's something to it as far as the paranormal being tied into Sasquatch, and it seems like some Sasquatch are just like I don't know your regular Bigfoots, and then others have like these abilities that they can do. But I guess at the end of the day, they all must be able to do the same things. But yeah, I think
Right. You bring up an interesting point. I think you might be right. Like some are trained in certain arts and some aren't.
yeah, I think they like when we die, we occupy certain areas. They get haunted or whatever. I think Sasquatch have the same ability when they pass on. The woods becomes haunted in a sense. Not every area, but certain places.
Right. And what would you say, Miguel, if I said they were never living?
No, it's a possibility just because I believe there's many other dimensions and a lot of things we don't know about the universe.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So where exactly do you investigate?
All around Missouri, really. I'll just go to different conservation areas, state parks, federal land, things like that, and just
What's
try to
the winter
hunt
like in
mainly.
Missouri? Can you go investigate in the winter, or is the winter does it get snow? And I don't know. Does it snow in Missouri?
No, not as much as it used to. So typically there's no snow. If it does, it's like a light dusting. But
What's the temperature? Does it get down into the 30s, or is it like in the 40s?
I mean, it gets down into the negatives. It was like negative 20 something last winter, and then it gets up, like 105 degrees plus. So it's all over the place.
Right. Because I was gonna say I'd be willing to travel down to Missouri in the dead of winter to go walk with you in some of your sites, or maybe check out some new locations. Have you noticed that in your locations where there's activity, there's always activity, or do you see that there's dead times?
Yeah, rarely is there activity, but sometimes when you go into these certain areas that have had Bigfoot activity in the past, you'll get something or find something new. But yeah, it's not typical to find things every time unless you're having hardcore activity that's like where you feel like you're marked and they're following you, that whole sort of thing.
Do you ever listen to the audio to see if if you get weird audio finds on your stuff outside of your recordings? Like when I say recordings, I mean I think you use task cams, don't you?
I use different ones as far as Zoom recorders, Olympus, Sony recorders, stuff like that. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So,
we've
but
gotten
on
some.
your video recordings too, do you also watch your audio or check your audio for weird recordings captured on your videos?
Yeah, and when there's Bigfoot activity, there's always weird stuff like that in the background. But I mean, as far as going into the woods randomly and doing it, no, I usually don't. But I mean, when they're around, yeah, yeah, it does happen.
It does. It's strange. What in the paranormal world they call them EVPs,
Hmm.
electric voice phenomenon, where you get a audio recording from something that wasn't there.
Yeah, yeah, that's happened with like wood knocks and stuff, and we're all around talking and listening for Sasquatch. We didn't hear it, but we watched the video footage back, and you can hear clear knocks.
Did you know in the 1920s when they were doing plasma stuff, and the psychics were saying they're talking to the dead? Remember that in the 1920s, the ghost pictures, ghost photography, and all that was popular.
Hmm.
Well, they were saying, and still mediums to this day. So in 2023, mediums that say they can talk to spirits and the guys with the TV shows, all that whole thing, say that when spirit arrives, they'll announce, more powerful ones will announce with a knock.
Yeah, that's interesting. As far as
And
like
that's what my
ghost
video
and
that I'm,
paranormal activity, like inside the house when they're at the round table, is that what you mean?
yep,
Okay.
yep. And it also works out in the woods too. So like with druids, that kind of stuff, the old Celtic ceremonies,
Hmm.
it's the same concept. So whenever a spirit arrives, they knock. And I've said before, and I've said this in 2016, I was like, it doesn't make sense that Bigfoot would knock. It just doesn't, especially if they're hunting. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, Jesus
but
says knock and the door will be open. Maybe he was talking about Bigfoot.
there you go. See, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm saying is that there's more to this. And since these questions like you just asked, what if those are the answers, man?
Hmm.
What if Bigfoot's ultimate goal is to bring people back to a spiritual center?
Yeah. Maybe like
And that's the big fight between science and Bigfoot.
maybe the knock is when they're like pinging back and forth between like dimensions and stuff. Like when the portal opens, that's the knock
Exactly.
sound.
Do you know how I envision this? I envision it like the X-Men's Nightcrawler, I think his name is, where he can be in one area right now, snap his fingers and be sitting on top of your head, and then snap his fingers and be 30 feet away from you. He can be anywhere he wants, he
Yeah.
teleports.
I
So it's like
picture
a
it like the old I don't know if it's Looney Tunes, but those old cartoons where like a figure would pop up on one side of the screen and when he disappears he pops out on another side of the screen.
exactly. See, this is the kind of stuff. This is, you know, what do you think about yourself, me, and finding a couple other investigators to talk about Bigfoot once a month and some of the things like this?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you could host it on your channel. I wouldn't mind where it goes. I don't care where it goes. I just want to get a group of guys like Christopher Noel. He stole so many of my ideas from 2016 to about 2018. I just got tired of sharing with him.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, you got to be careful with that. Um
But I don't mind if you take it because the reason I didn't like Noel is he didn't investigate. He's a thinker, and there's a world of difference. They call it in the business world. It's called practical experience. If you don't have practical experience, it doesn't matter how many books you read, because a book will tell you that this will happen. But when you get out into the real world and you start having scenarios and real life people making real life decisions, the book falls to the wayside. It's just more of a framework. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, we're over an hour in, and I think that pretty well covers your story, the podcast, and I
Oh,
appreciate your
there's so
time.
much more, man. There's so much more, but if people like it and they want me to come back on and share some more stories, I definitely will with you, bro.
Okay. Yeah, I'm down for that, and we'll have to talk more about the Sasquatch map on the website and see if we can get that lined out. Like I said, I don't know anything about programming and coding, so
Yep, and The only thing that I would say that I would stand firm on in the world of Bigfoot is that you can't kill them. That's the only thing I would stand firm on, is that you can't kill them. I don't. That's just, you cannot kill them.
Yeah, I've heard stories where people have shot them and they never recover them, or it doesn't phase them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. 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 There's so many things happening. Like I said, Expedition Bigfoot is finding some things with their big ass technology, like their lidar. Having lidar and a camera on a. They had a Boston Dynamics robot, a dog, Boston Dynamics dog, go into a cave because they weren't sure of the atmosphere in the cave, like what you could breathe, and they didn't have the right material, so they just got their drone guy who comes in to operate the Boston Dynamics dog, and got you gotta watch it, Miguel. You gotta watch Expedition Bigfoot. Of all the things that are out there, because of the money they have to use stuff, will give you ideas and might. So, do you have any ideas concerning Bigfoot that is true, that you hold today that you didn't have when you first started investigating?
Mm, I mean, even despite the fact that I've found that they have paranormal abilities, um, I have been able to go out in the woods and find physical evidence of them, unlike other topics like Dogman or aliens, things like that. Like if you go out looking for them, the chances of you finding that are going to be, it's going to be pretty rare. But with Sasquatch, I found that you can actually go out there and track them down like a physical creature, despite the fact that there's like a paranormal aspect to it. So I feel like, with certain ghosts, if you try to find them, it's like good luck with that. But with Sasquatch, you can track them to some extent.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree 100% with that. What kind of paranormal? So here's one thing I didn't share that you might be able to want to include this. I'm not sure. I was down at the Minnesota River taking pictures of a tree break and a couple of the tree leans. They were um, high volume, and so one of the ways I learned to discern from natural to um, possible activity is when it's high concentration. And I'm not talking like high concentration. Like when you're out there, you'll start to see what straight line wind damage looks like, what a microburst looks like, what a touchdown might look like. And you get these. You can start to see the way Mother Nature does things versus what's a possible outlier. And I was seeing what was possible outlying stuff, and I was taking pictures. And on my peripheral, I had to be alert because I'm on a path where mountain bikers come flying through in groups of three or more. Sometimes they're deep, like 10, and they're flying. These dudes are not um these guys are flying, man, usually. So you have to be aware when you're taking pictures. If you're not paying attention, you can easily back up and get run over by somebody who, isn't making a sound. They're just coming by. So at my corner of my eye, I seen this black figure coming. Like the only thing my mind thought was mountain biker. And I'm taking a picture. I'm looking through the. I don't have it on my view on my viewfinder screen on the camera. I have it in the hole. I'm looking through the actual viewfinder taking a picture because the light was kind of funky that day. So I needed to look at the viewfinder. I'm looking through the viewfinder. Through my peripheral, I see this black figure coming toward me. And because of the height, the only thing I can think of, mountain biker. And so I'm clicking. I'm like, boom, 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 boom. I'm taking my pictures. I don't use autofocus. I always use manual because I want to make sure that what I'm looking at is what I'm looking at. I don't want it to adjust focus. And I've had um, situations where my camera just went out of focus out in the field when I use autofocus. I have my reasons on that. But seeing that figure coming at me, and I was taking my pictures, and I spun at the last second. You know how, like, I don't know if you ever played football, but I was running back for a half second, and when you get hit, you spin. You try to spin out, right? You try to spin. So in order, I didn't want to take the full blow of this dude hitting me because that's what I thought was going to happen. I spun, and when I spun, I spun. And so just imagine yourself spinning. You spin, and as you do the halfway point of your spin, you start talking smack. And that's what I was doing. I was talking smack. I spun and I said, hey, why don't you slow down? And when I got to the end of my revolution, when I did the 360, as I looked down the road where that biker should have been leaving me, there was nothing. And I called that counting coup.
Yeah, that is very strange, and I appreciate you sharing that with me.
But that's one of the paranormal pieces that happened to me out there. What's some of the paranormal things you've had happen when you're out there?
Um, it's a bunch of things, really. I mean, I've mentioned it before a lot on the channel as far as being tagged, just going to different locations and having encounters and experiences back to back, things like that. I mean, the timing of how they operate,
Right.
the whole, everything about them, really.
And there's more than just one. Here's a thought. This is a thought. You ever heard of the Brown Mountain Lights?
Yeah.
So the Brown Mountain Lights out in North Carolina come up on this mountaintop, and they've been studying them for over 100 years, right? Trying to figure out what they are. Um, Medicine men travel as balls of light. Not all of them, just ones who reach a certain level. It's just like anything else. And plus, you have to factor in whether or not spirits like you. If spirits like you, you get more abilities. But it all depends on how you live. You have to live in a good way, in order for spirits to like you. So they travel in balls of light. So Brown Mountain, the lights seem to pick up in the fall of the year, and that makes sense because that's when you had council. And the United States, their constitution is all based on the nations that were here, the Iroquois tribe. They had a whole written um, constitution on the way that the people of Turtle Island, which is now the United States, the people of Turtle Island who lived here would conduct themselves. The United States took that and made it into what the rest of the world says is now the most ambitious form of freedom the world has ever known. Well, it's not working here because it's not their idea, but that's where it came from. So we had written language and all that stuff, and we had meetings, we had councils, we got together. Uh, the Brown Mountain Lights is a continuation of that from the Bigfoot side of things, is my belief. Um, because I know that they do gather. That part I can say with certainty too. So there's more than just one. And then here is something I'm saying without certainty. I wonder if they tell one another about us. You know what I mean? Um, because they have different communities, just like we have different communities. They work in different areas, just like we work in different areas. But they meet and they talk amongst themselves and they say, "Hey, look, Joe, Minnesota Bigfoot's over here. He might be coming up to your area. Keep an eye out. This is what he looks like. Blah blah blah." And they might say, "Miguel, Sasquatch theory. He's been over here. He might be coming to your area. Look out. This is what he looks like. Blah blah blah." Because we always talk about how intelligent they seem to be. Well, I think that would be the ultimate form of intelligence if they share information and they're all aware of us.
Yeah, very well could. And a lot of people talk about the mind speak. But yeah, Joe, I appreciate you for being a guest on the show and taking the time to share all your encounters and experiences. And if anyone out there has had a Bigfoot encounter, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. But yeah, Joe, if you have any more experiences, any more encounters, feel free to reach out. And I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely, Miguel. And it's one investigator to the other. I'm a fan of you, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I really enjoyed your story. Keep in touch, and we'll see if we can get together in the future and see what we can do.
Sounds good. You have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Take care, man.
Yeah, bye.
Bye. All right, moving on to our next guest. Welcome to Sasquatch Theory. Sumbo, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and your Sasquatch experiences.
To start, I need to precise, as you mentioned, that I had multiple encounters, and that's been over 40 years for me. And so I'm part of those experiencers or contactees that are called repeaters for having multiple and sometimes ongoing encounters. So it's quite difficult to summarize like 40 some years of experiences and learning and research that have also taught me to communicate with non-human intelligence, Sasquatch and star beings as well, to learn more and more on this journey with these experiences. So I'm often asked, when did it start? And my first close encounter in first week of October 81 has been, I've told that story often because it was significant for the fact that it started me on this journey and on this quest. However, it was not necessarily the most significant encounter I had in all those years because the context developed and the communication became more and more profound and direct and complex. So I can say briefly about this first experience, but yeah, because it's often requested. We were 10 young guys who went out to camp near the Chalice Reserve in so-called British Columbia by the Fraser River. I didn't know back then, but the name Sasquatch comes from their language, their local Salish language. And they have the Sasquatch as their emblem, their tribal emblem, and a lot of things around there, including the Sasquatch Days in the nearby town, which is Harrison Hot Springs, dubbed the Sasquatch capital of the world. So just to put in context, there we went camping, and in the middle of the night it was heavy rain and very dark, pitch black night, starless, and we heard heavy footfalls coming through the brush along the river, and we all described the best we could understand that we heard someone talking to our head or into our dreams, others said. It was basically admonishing us for disrespecting the land there. We stripped a couple small cedars to build our lean-to. So the 6-inch thick post that was supporting the structure was snapped, and the roof fell in our faces, and we woke up in the middle of the night under pouring rain. No one in sight, no light, nothing. A friend was in a small tent nearby, and he arrived freaked out and told us we have to leave, and we wondered why. And he said, "You won't believe me, but I saw a big hairy monster come and put down the camp and then vanished like a ghost." So that was my first close encounter, and summarized here. And it was back then we didn't even relate the event to Sasquatch. We didn't have any knowledge at all about any of that. So we couldn't either understand the telepathic episode or the vanishing. That are some kind of paranormal phenomena that we often see surrounding Sasquatch and other non-human intelligence, like star beings. So that pretty much started me. I was 17. It started me on a spiritual quest. My first tour of North America that lasted 2 years, going around temples, ashrams, churches, and any kind of spiritual knowledge I could find. I must say, after that quest, I found most of my answers in ancestral shamanic cultures, indigenous spiritual traditions, because they have been used and they have learned how to deal with the paranormal, the spirit world, departed souls, other entities, star beings, and Sasquatch alike, and they have most indigenous cultures have kept some knowledge and connection with those beings. So it went on for me with sporadic encounters here and there. 83 and then Petrified Forest, Arizona, where I had my first telepathic contact, and the Sasquatch came in some kind of a holographic appearance, like a ghostly, translucid form, although I could see him very well, and I could not quite understand yet about their interdimensional abilities back then. I thought it was a vision, like a spirit I was seeing. And he gave me information about when their people were walking with the dinosaurs. Archaeology has proven that we find around the world some larger than human-sized, human-like petrified footprints. I've seen some myself, even not far from there in the Painted Desert. And so there were sporadic encounters like that with while I was on my learning journey. In 86, Trinity County, Northern California, I heard a Sasquatch came in a very remote community where I was living, where he stole products in the garden, and the dog got real mad, started barking, afraid, and I heard the Sasquatch run, bipedal, heavy, real fast, like an elephant rushing into the woods. Then he stopped and released that legendary blood-curdling scream that silenced the whole forest, including the dog. It was about, I just looked recently on the Google map of that site, and it was about 100 meters from me that time. It went on. We found three structures. I was shown in the mid 80s to early 90s. I was going for hiking trips or 4 seasons, sometimes with canoes or snowshoes and toboggans in the Algonquin Park in Ontario. And there was one of the best woodsmen I've known, an old friend of mine there, who was the first person I met who had Sasquatch encounters. And he showed me the first 3 structures. They're out in the middle where nobody goes, and told me his stories there. And I went a few times and felt being watched in those woods. I spent 10 days alone on a mountaintop there. And finally, in 92, I went with my girlfriend, and we had a Sasquatch. We were camping outside. Walk around us, basically, in an invisible form. We could see the footsteps in the leaves. The leaves moving under his feet, but we couldn't see anyone. And he was throwing pine cones at me all night, just like to tease or something. And again, I couldn't understand that they can come in an invisible form and interdimensional, different densities and frequencies that do not all reflect light, or are not all different dimensions are not submitted to linear time, as we are most often conditioned to limit. But linear time applies only to the physical plane, and that makes about 3% of the energy the science can calculate. So there's another 97% of the energy that we are made of and that we are part of that is non-physical, so cannot be perceived with physical senses, but it's just as real.
I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure what it is, but it sounds like some type of banging sound, and I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, sorry. Could be my table that's shaking.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, so these encounters went on for several years. Meanwhile, I was learning and being trained in shamanic knowledge with dozens of indigenous elders from dozens of indigenous nations. So it took me 33 years before I could come to close communication openly, like aging, what we can call contactors, because we sometimes calling them and they come, whether Sasquatch or starships as well. That happened several times in my path. So by 2014, I went to where my native ancestors were born in northern Saskatchewan, where my grandfather was born. I found where he was born, and I did research and found the grave of his great grandfather, my great great grandfather. And I had seen in the archives that he and his twin brother were found around 80-year-old in the wilderness of the Northwest Territories by the Great Slave Lake, where they were living in a hut of branches, eating bugs and roots, and wearing rawhide and speaking no human language. And I was very intrigued by that story. And I asked if I met my native Creek cousins. Well, I talked to them and met the family historian and asked her about that story, which she was very surprised I had found. And she told me, well, we have Sasquatch in the family, in our lineage. And I found out that I didn't quite realize right away that it means I'm 1/32nd Sasquatch. And I found out later through much more studies that such stories are quite common among certain native tribes, especially in the north and the northwest in North America, but also in Australia, in Tibet or Siberia. These stories are fairly common. That the Sasquatch have shared their genes with us, Homo sapiens. And if we look at what the best genetic studies done on the topic, they confirm that they have 99% the same DNA than we do, and 1% unknown. So they are our closest relatives on this planet or in the universe. So when I found that I was part of Sasquatch, so relative, I became very intrigued to know who they were, and became very involved in research, everything I could find online or elsewhere, and found a lot of good information in native accounts. And while that was going on, they started coming to me. And they started coming. I was living in a school bus for a couple of seasons. And they started coming and walk around, and I could hear them. They walked a couple times on my roof, shaking the whole bus. And one night, I saw and heard him come and look at me through the window, just about 6 feet from me. Looked at each other for 1 or 2 minutes, and I could hardly believe my eyes. If I was still in the cognitive dissonance process of not believing what I can't explain. However, these experiences kept happening throughout that year until I felt I was talking about it only to a few good friends, I would say. People use with shamanic topics, some experience. And I found out that some of them had their own experience, but usually people don't talk about it openly. Anyways, I went in May 2015. I went on Vancouver Island because that's the highest amount of report and sightings, and really they call it Sasquatch Island. The native cultures there all have very strong Sasquatch themes, and their totem poles and stories. And I had myself a very clear sighting in 2003 with a good friend. We were coming out of ceremonies with natives, and out in the middle of the bush, like 40 kilometers from the first house in the middle of the rainforest, there was that Sasquatch in the road that we both saw very well. So I went back there in 2015, a place called Kennedy Lake. And I went there with a specific purpose of connecting with the Sasquatch. And the first day I found footprints, the first clear ones I remember finding. And then I camped and walked around for another week until after the 8th day, I did ceremonies with drums and chants and native flute and smudge, basically calling on the good spirits. And that night, that's when I had my first close conversation. And that's where the Sasquatch Message to Humanity trilogy that I authored starts with that story that night when I heard that Sasquatch knock on trees really loud, almost like a cannon, twice coming closer, then shaking and breaking trees twice, coming closer, then his footstep coming, and he sat behind my tent. And I admit I was still unsure who that was, what I was dealing with, and somewhat afraid, but that was the goal of my quest. So I was also grateful that I had this encounter, and right away I said thoughts of peace and openness, wanting to learn. And right away he started teaching me, and I had to say this communication, although he was there in a physical form, although you can hear their voice if they wish, the most communication with non-human intelligence, including animals, happen in telepathy. And when higher intelligence, it's an information download. They give you a whole set of information at once that you need time to process in linear time with the rational brain. But it's like a knowing that you are imparted with to understand things you've been wondering about. And that's when my close friendship with the Sasquatch started. The following night, he came again, but this time in an invisible form, but I could hear his. He came as a whirlwind. He whispered to my ear as I was asking a sign. The following day, walking out, there was a female that was calling back and forth with me all while I was walking out of the forest. Right away, I kind of felt that I couldn't talk about that so much because I had these kinds of experiences before, but there's a point where it's beyond any doubt. You know what you've seen and heard, and you're not. It's not misidentification, or it's not confusion or mixed memories or delusion, because it's a real experience, and the more you embrace those experiences, the more it can happen again. So that time they started teaching me on an ongoing basis. I found myself 1 week later at an international indigenous leadership gathering where I had been invited by some chiefs, and I arrived early, so I spent time with the elders and the local chiefs. And among those Salishan-speaking tribes, the Sklatlium there, the Sasquatch is common knowledge. Everybody has first or second-hand story of Sasquatch. So when they started mentioning it, I mentioned my encounter, and they were all very open and interested to hear what I had lived and what they had told me. And that's when I understood that for all those years I had these experiences, I could hardly find a handful of close friends I could share that with. But there's always been some circles, especially indigenous spiritual circles, because they have been familiar with those topics, where this knowledge is passed on and is welcome, and you're not seen as a weirdo. You're seen as someone who has an experience or more, and probably has learned something. What I found out is that the same happened in Australia when I was visiting indigenous communities there. They all have what they call Yahweh down there. They have different names for what we call a Sasquatch, but they all have plenty of first and second-hand stories and legends, and including those beings, and ceremonies as well. So this knowledge is there, and what I found out is that very often the most knowledgeable people about Sasquatch or tar beings won't speak publicly. They won't speak outside of a well-trusted, safe inner circle, or like a ceremonial circle or certain circumstances when asked. And they will, I've seen elders reveal their knowledge of Sasquatch to their own family because they have never asked. I've seen the most amazing accounts also. So that's what I found out because since I started connecting on a regular basis with Sasquatch, they asked me to put down in written form. At first, it was a series of posts on my Facebook group because I had a large international audience. And then it was proposed to turn into a book, which was published the following year. And coincided with the first spiritual Sasquatch conference I took part in. We helped organize in Washington State. Then there was a very great welcoming feedback for the first book and a demand for another one. So it turned into a second and a third book in that trilogy. And after that, the Sasquatch asked me to write Hairy Humanoids from the Wild, encyclopedia of all things Sasquatch. That is a very detailed research and 6,000 years of literature concerning the hairy humanoids around the world. So that gave birth, I could say, to some events, some networks, websites, groups, and a collective disclosure effort to bring out of the closet into the light the thousands and thousands of experiencers out there that have kept it to themselves all those years for fear of ridicule or for not finding the right audience. So there's about 400 experiencers so far have shared their encounters on my website, and I've met well over 500. I can't recall anymore of people who have had close encounters with Sasquatch or star beings. They often are connected or seen together, or they come along in some cases. And this is pretty much what has been a good part of my contribution is social involvement for the raising consciousness and sharing what the truth we've found, that it's not necessarily the absolute truth, but it's sometimes I've always said that the disclosure has been happening. It comes from the grassroots level, from the thousands, if not millions, of people who have had these kind of encounters, or spiritual circles that are not known publicly. They don't go online first, let's say. And it's not going to come from the top down, the government, the military, like most people tend to look up to those institutions that have been perpetrating the cover-up and the lies for decades at least. So now they feed us with their Pentagon or Congress hearings, spoon feed us. It's like what we've known since 75 years, that, yeah, there is something else than us. But it's still far from the full story that I can say experiencers like me and others have discovered. What we can say about Sasquatch is that they are highly evolved, wise, ancient being, psychically developed. They have what we could call supernatural abilities, but interdimensional understanding that allows them to shift between dimensions, like some shamans or mystics and all ancient traditions have practiced at some point.
Yeah.
So that's what yeah.
I appreciate you for sharing your experiences and encounters with me, Sumbo. If you would dive into the encounter that you and your friend had, what did the Sasquatch look like? What color was it? How tall? If you could just go through the descriptions or the features, please.
Sure. They're all different, and they are just like us humans are. and they have different types or subspecies that I have noticed mostly in Australia. There are some that are giant size, like very tall. The biggest footprint that I found were 26-inch, or maybe another one, 23-inch, that make a Sasquatch like 15, 18 feet tall. There are stories in many tribes, especially in Australia, about those big ones, but also up north and in Siberia. And then there are the ones that are more or less human size, but a little taller. They can reach maybe 8 feet or more. And then there are the ones who are short, they're up 2-3 feet, maybe 4 feet tall at the most. They are also described in many parts of the world, like all around the southern Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, for instance. So that gives an idea of the vast diversity of branches and lineages they've developed over hundreds of millions of years, even before us modern humans existed. What they look like, some have different physical traits. For instance, the Duliga, the giant ones in Australia, and the Yeti in the Himalayas have the opposed thumb on the foot, so their feet look a bit like a hand. And sometimes some have 6 toes, and there are different reports that some might have double rows of teeth. Some have a much more human-like face. Others have a more simian-like face. That probably depends on their level of human genetics they carry. But I can tell a story that completes the first one I told earlier about my first encounter, because it happened at the exact same site, but 38 years later, when I was with another Sasquatch communicator who had encounters, and we went back. We were at the Sasquatch Days in Harrison Hot Springs, as I mentioned earlier. It's a native-led festival with ceremonies where they honor the Sasquatch. After that, we thought, well, where should we go camp? And I remembered about the site of my first encounter that I told earlier. And so we went out there, and I found the rest of the structures of the lean-to we had built 38 years earlier, and right in front there was a small tree structure, teepee shaped, that had been made, as the Sasquatch are known to make, and it had some green boughs woven into it with knots, and to show it was freshly made. It was just made that day probably for our coming. So we stayed there at night, and we started made a little fire, and we had night came, and just before at dusk I saw the face of an elder grandmother Sasquatch watching us. So I showed my friend. He could feel her, but he couldn't see her. So I asked her if I could film her, and she laughed and said, "Well, give it a try." And I turned the camera on. She didn't show up in the camera, but I could see her face. She gave me some information, and then she disappeared from my sight and appeared on my friend's side. To my friend's side, he started seeing her. He said, "Oh, look, she's right there." I wasn't seeing her, and then she gave him some specific information. That's how personalized they can manifest. That's why you will have sometimes multiple witnesses to a same encounter or spaceship even, and not everybody sees the same thing, or sees it, or sees the same details. They're all looking at the same thing. That's what happened. That time they show us that they can give us a very strong telepathic image that we see, we hear, but the person next to us doesn't. And they can switch at will, like they did that time. And after that, she sent 5 big waves of love to my friend's heart. And he went like, he felt a big healing. And then she said, now you are ready to meet us. And right as he told me that, we heard heavy footfalls come through the brush, and a big 9-foot tall elder male came pretty close to us. And my friend was a bit impressed because that was pretty direct. And but they came in peace, and I recognize. He told me he recognized me from the encounter 38 years earlier, and he told me that he was glad I had learned since, and I now came in respect. And so he basically they called out their clan. And within a few minutes, we could count 15 of them around us. We could see visually they were maybe not all totally materialized or partially, but they were visible. We could see their shape, clear shadows. So I asked, they were teaching us about who they were, their most ancient lineage of Sasquatch on the planet, and that's why that's the core, that's the heart of all Sasquatch culture, basically, where it started being known to our modern cultures, and southwest BC. So there, I said, you must know my Sasquatch guide, my main Sasquatch teacher, who gave me the message to transcript. And they said, we sure know him. He's our elder. So I asked if he was with them, and she told me, ask him. Well, ask him in telepathy. And it took a few seconds. And he replied, he said, I'm very far on a spaceship, but I can hear you. So I asked him if he was coming, and he said, okay, I'm coming. And just as I said these words to my friend there, he told me, look up. And I looked up, and we looked up, and there was a spaceship coming down. And it came and just above the Fraser River. It stopped and hovered for a few seconds there. It became really bright green light. And then it glided above the tree line, and just over us, we could see 3 spots under it. And I was informed that my Sasquatch guide and the star being had just arrived. And we heard their footsteps, and they appeared in their astral form to basically greet us and give us short but intense teachings for what we were accomplishing on our quest at that point. And after that, the spaceship had gone and landed on the mountaintop across the river, and we could see it there for a good part of the night, until we were told, well, now we will let you rest, and we will continue on our journey. and the spaceship took off, and all the ones we could see around us disappeared. It became really calm, and we could sleep a little bit before dawn. So that was the same site as the first experience, but with more experience, more understanding, and practice and communication. And this is one of the experiences they have given me to share with the understanding it brings.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you for sharing that with me. And before we wrap up the show, how do you go about communicating with the Sasquatch?
It's a good question, and it's a very good point, because if you, it's like I always say, it's like approaching wise elders. You have to be humble, respectful, peaceful intentions, loving intentions. You don't try to come and trick them or trap or lure them or outsmart them. You have no luck at that. You come to learn. You come to create friendship, open to communication if they wish to. And it takes courage, because it can be very impressive. Their energy is very powerful, not just physically, but also psychically. And also they can read our thoughts. So that's why don't try to fool them. And you better come with clear thoughts. That's the most successful approach. But if you look at all those TV shows that run around, Bigfoot for seasons long and never catch a glimpse in their infrared Google or whatever, because they're there for fame, and they're there for probably even try to grab something out of it, if not a body sometimes. So that's why the Sasquatch have no interest in meeting those people who come with that approach. But if you come, you ask permission to enter their homes where they live, their territory. You respect the territory. You might bring offerings, gifts to show your friendship. Where you feel they might be, or you might notice some activity, and with no expectation, just being grateful for who they are, and they see this kind of attitude and good intention. And so far, I've assisted over 100 people in having their first contact with these simple advice. Just go with your heart, not with your ego. Not try to be the guy who got the photo, because that's not what it's all about. It's a spiritual quest, and if you go with the spiritual respect, you have a much better chance that they will contact you and teach you something.
Well, I appreciate you for sharing that with me. And I tend to agree. If you go out there and you're aggressive, you probably won't experience a lot of the activity. But if you're out there being peaceful and respecting nature, I think you might have a pretty good chance.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. Also, the Sasquatch that you channeled, did you physically see the Sasquatch, or was it more of spiritual?
Several physical encounters, at times with other witnesses. I also have of 7 or 8 hair samples from him and others. And there, I have to say that, when people ask, are they totally in the physical, sometimes they're in between somehow. Like you can see half of their body, or you can see their outline, like a shadow, or you can hear their footprints or feel their touch even, and you don't see them sometimes. So there's all these different ways, different aspects of them that can manifest in that. If when they're invisible and they move the ground around and you hear them, are they just invisible in the physical form, or are they in the just beyond the physical plane? When they appear, very often people will say, even Daniel Boone, I think, and David Crockett had stories about that. As they appear and disappear. So do they just materialize and then go back to another dimension? Or do they, at times you see like they're almost invisible, like a hologram? It could be an astral projection. So all of these, I say, I've seen them in the physical several times, at times with other witnesses. But other times it's like in between, or maybe it's partially physical or just for a moment. And that's why sometimes we find one or two or just a few footprints and no more, because that was the time they interacted with the material plane to leave these tracks.
Very good, and I appreciate you for sharing that. Yeah, I think the Sasquatch are spiritual and physical at the same time. Would you agree, or do you think they're purely spiritual?
Yeah, you're exactly right. From all I've learned first in my experience with, as well as what has been taught for generation. It's not like a new thing we just discovered. We're just relearning this ancient knowledge that many tribes have had. They will say, they're supernatural, they're wise, they're the keepers of the forest, of the wildlife, and they will teach us to be good caretakers if we follow their example.
Yeah, and I agree as well that they are an ancient race of beings that might stem back as far as the dinos, or pretty far back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate your time and your willingness to share your encounters. I know it's not easy to openly share that type of stuff, but I think the viewers will find it to be rather interesting and informative.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and I wish you the best success with your great channel. You're doing a wonderful work.
Thank you very much, sir, and you take care and have an excellent day.
Thank you. Blessings.
Thank you. Bye. All right. Thank you very much to both of tonight's guests for sharing your experiences, your theories, and what you believe to be true. A lot of people do think it's a physical creature that's living out there in the woods, and anything beyond that is a bunch of baloney, which I think everyone's right. I think the people who go out there and find physical evidence and prove that these things use trails, tree markers, they go off a scent, I think all of that is true. And for the people that think it's something spiritual, something beyond the physical, I believe that to be true as well. I think everyone's right. All right, well, I appreciate the people who tuned in tonight and listened to this episode. I do have some really good encounters coming out on the show soon, so you guys will have to look out for that. And yeah, thank you guys very much for supporting the channel, and until the next one, take care, everyone.